In today's video, Knights of the Realm battle the undead legions of Acheron as we play the Dragon Rampant fantasy wargaming rules from Osprey Wargames. Well, hi folks, this is Lee from Skirmish Wargames. Welcome to the channel. I'm here with Lynn.
Hello.
And as promised, today we're going to play some Dragon Rampant, the fantasy wargaming rule set published by Osprey Wargames and written by Daniel Mersey, or Mersey, we're not sure which, but written by Daniel. So yesterday we played a couple of practice turns, but this is going to be our first full game. And I think we got a pretty good handle on the rules, but of course if we make any mistakes, feel free to mention those in the comments. Fortunately, Dragon Rampant is a very forgiving rule set, so if you have kind of a basic understanding of the rules, you can have a lot of fun pushing miniatures around and rolling dice without worrying too much about a lot of finicky little specific rules. Really, the point is just to have fun with the game, so that's what we're going to do. But yeah, if we blow something completely, of course, please mention that, because we'd like to learn, we'd like to improve as we move along in our adventures in Dragon Rampant. All right, well, let's take a look at today's armies. As I mentioned in our last video, we are using some old Confrontation Age of Ragnarok miniatures, which allows us to field some larger forces than we normally do. Usually our games involve squad level teams, maybe 10 miniatures on a side. But as you can see, our two 24-point Dragon Rampant armies today are both considerably bigger than that. Now, in the last video, I did mention that we are playing kind of on a 3x3 mat, which is sort of small for Dragon Rampant. Really, you should have a 6x4, I think, to give the game its due. But we're going to play it on a 3x3, and actually we're going to expand it a little bit. Our table here is 42x42, so we're going to say that even the areas outside of the mat are going to be fair game to keep miniatures from running off the table too soon.
So if they run all the way off the table, they're off the table. Literally.
Literally off the table. Another thing is, because of the size of our table, we mentioned in the last video that we might try fielding reduced model count units. So instead of 12 archers in a unit, for example, we might field 6, but they would still have 12 strength points and still have the same unit cost. But after looking at it, it's not too bad. I think if we shrunk all the infantry and archer units down to half strength, or half size anyway, then it doesn't look that impressive. So most of the units are going to be full strength, and then some of them are going to be reduced model count per sort of the Dragon Rampant suggestions. So big monsters or heroic cavalry or stuff like that might be reduced model count, though they still have the same effectiveness and unit cost as a regular unit of cavalry or a regular unit of infantry. So that's how we're playing it, and we'll kind of explain that as we go along. All right, clear as mud?
Clear as mud.
So for today's scenario, we are playing the undead units of Acheron. That's these guys over here, versus the noble units of the Baronies of Lahnar. That's these guys over here, and they have actually reached out to their Wolfen allies. They have a co-defense pact with the Wolfen, so they're bringing some Wolfen into the fray. And in today's scenario, some necromancer out there in the wilderness has again been tampering with the forces of the undead. He has raised an undead army, sent them off to be the scourge of the living, and so basically these undead are going forth during harvest time, or they're going to wreck the harvest and scare all the deer away and the bunny rabbits and all the Thanksgiving turkeys and stuff like that. So the forces of Lahnar have rallied a retinue to rush out to the desecrated temple to prevent the undead from capturing the desecrated temple and using that as a base of operations. So that is our thin backstory for today. So the undead legions of Acheron, that is led by here the Great Skull and his two lesser skull minions. And I kind of decided, well, these guys are going to be heavy cavalry. That's the stats that I think best represents them. And they also have a bonus ability, a special ability called Fear, which means if they attack a unit and cause that unit to take a courage test, that unit then rolls -1 on their courage test, because these guys are kind of scary. And speaking of scary, we have a unit of gargoyles over here. These are lesser war beasts, so their unit cost is normally 4, but they have 2 points for flight, so they can fly, and 2 points for poison, which Lynn is really thrilled with. And that means if they're attacking and they roll a 6, that actually does 2 points. So on the attack, they could be pretty lethal. The lesser war beasts are not very good on the defense, as I remember. So unfortunately, my Confrontation Undead collection doesn't have as many units as some of my other factions, but we do have enough units to field a unit of undead thralls. So that's what these guys are. So they are normal heavy infantry. That's normally 4 points. And they have a special ability, which is no feelings. I think that's what it's called. And that's a 0-point buff, but basically it means they are not subject to being battered, though they can still rout if their enchantment is broken. If they take so much damage, the enchantment is broken, then they dissolve back to dust. But on the other hand, they tend to be a little bit fragile because they're just moldering bones. So even though they don't get battered, all attack rolls against them are rounded up. So normally, let's say you had to do 3 successes to do a point of damage. If you did 3 and then 1 other success, that would actually kill 2. So all the damage dice are rolled up, which can be useful. And finally, here is the Gorgon. She is a legendary underworld creature, but for today's game, she is a heavy missile unit. So she's just going to use her tentacles to travel around the battlefield and launch eldritch bolts. So imagine her as the equivalent of a unit of heavy crossbows or a cannon or a catapult or something like that. So she doesn't fire very consistently, but yeah, she can pack a punch if she manages to unload some magical energy at 18-inch range. All right, so here is the emergency retinue that the Baronies of Lahnar have assembled and dispatched out into the wilderness to try to stop the undead horde. And so here is a unit of heavy infantry. They have the offensive buff. So normal heavy infantry have spears. They can form a wall of spears, and they're sort of better on defense than offense. These guys have better offense, but they can't form a wall of spears, so they are a little more expensive. So that is the heavy infantry. Over here we have the super elite cavalry. So normally this would be a 6-unit formation, but we've only got 3 of these. So these are elite cavalry heroes, led by Lynn's army leader, the Gold Lioness. And so normal knights, they're kind of a-holes actually. So they don't activate when you want them to. They kind of go on a wild charge when they see something in front of them they want to mow down. And so they're expensive, but not all that reliable. These units here have received a buff that makes them more disciplined, so they don't do wild charges, and they activate more readily. So they're going to be more useful in the battlefield, but they are more expensive. And this is the leader, so if she is destroyed, then that's going to affect the entire army. Yeah, the leaders give a courage buff, so any of these units or around the Great Skull on the other side of the table within 12 inches will get a courage buff if the leader is within 12 inches. Of course, on the other hand, if the leader is killed, then every unit in the army has to make a courage test because all is lost. Our leader is gone. So let's hope that doesn't happen. Then we have just a basic 4-point unit of archers. These are light missile, so that is just a 4-point unit. And over here we have a unit of wolfen trackers, wolfen hunters, and they are bellicose infantry, which kind of represents the barbarians and or berserkers of the world. Now normally bellicose infantry would be a 12-figure unit, but because these guys are so big, we've made them 6. But again, the unit cost is the same and the strength is the same. They are just 6 units instead of 12. And bellicose infantry are very good on offense, not so good on defense. These guys are rangers and they're fleet of foot, so they work really well inside the woods. They like fighting in the woods. But we gave them a buff. There is a buff you can give bellicose, which is called super shiny armor or something like that, which increases their defense from 2 to 3. So because these guys are savage, they're going to have more resilience when it comes to fighting. And won't get mowed down so easily because of their lack of armor. So just their general fortitude is going to keep them standing. So that is your bellicose infantry. So for today's game, the undead are going to be on defense and the baronies are going to be on offense. So the undead, that's me, are going to set up first. Then the barons' troops will set up, the baronies will set up, and then Lynn will move first. And then that will be the start of our game. So we're going to quickly pre-set up, and then we'll get right to some gameplay here in our first on-screen game of Dragon Rampant Undead versus the shiny gold hordes of the Baronies. All right, folks, well, here we are. We're getting ready to play the game. We have pre-deployed our forces. Since the undead are the defenders, they have placed first, and then Lynn has placed her team on the other side of the table. And since the Lahnar Baronies are the attackers, then they will move first. And in the intro to today's video, I mentioned this was going to be our first on-screen game of Dragon Rampant, and actually it is our second. We played our first game, and during the course of that, there was an error. There was an error in how casualties were applied to a unit of Lahnar Guard, which caused them to basically fail their courage check, to become a broken unit, at which point they were attacked by another unit, and then they eventually scattered. So in fairness to them, we are going to replay today's game because it was kind of a cascade effect, and then once that error took place, it affected everything else. But I will mention that Lynn's forces scored a decisive victory. So even though their unit of guard was unfairly basically routed during the course of the game, they did win. So they pretty much scoured the countryside of undead with the exception of the Gorgon. And along with that victory, Lynn's Knights had a pretty victorious moment when they charged my unit of gargoyles. They rolled their 12-die attack, and I think they got 8 or 9 sixes. Almost a clean sweep, and took a big chunk out of the gargoyle unit. And yeah, so these guys are going to be a little more tentative this game and try to avoid those pointy sticks being wielded by the mounted riders, the elite riders of the Lahnar Baronies. So.
They also did good against your skulls, too.
They did. They are a very strong offensive unit, and they move fast, so we will keep that in mind. Okay, so as we go into turn 1, here are my gargoyles, here are my undead thralls. Here is my Gorgon, that's an individual figure who acts as a unit of heavy missiles. And here are my great skulls, including my leader, the greatest of skulls, and they are acting as a unit of heavy cavalry on their big, tall goat legs. And then over here are the shiny gold Lahnar. There is a basic unit of light missiles. These are these archers here. Here is the guard, that's heavy infantry. There are the elite riders, and these guys are more disciplined than typical knights. And then here are your Bellicose Infantry, these wolfen, and they're going to be very happy to hide in the woods until it's time to charge out and, put a hurt on some skeletons or something like that. All right, Lynn, well, you are the attacker, so do you wish to move some of your units now and get them into the fray, and we'll get this game on the road?
Let's get this game on the road. My cavalry and my guard activate the easiest, so we're going to try them first. They both activate on a 5.
Right. So if you activate a unit and you fail your activation roll, that's the end of your turn. So sometimes it makes sense to activate the ones that activate more easily.
Yes, so we're going to start out with the guard.
Okay. And they activate on a 5+?
Correct. And they do.
Okay. So they activate with a 9, and they have a movement of up to 6. Regular heavy infantry are spearmen, and they can form a wall of spears. So they're better on defense than they are on offense. These guard have the offensive buff, so they cannot form a wall of spears, but they're stronger on offense. Okay, so that is your guard, your Lahnar guard, your heavy infantry.
Cavalry.
Cavalry. Elite cavalry.
And they activate as well.
That's an 8.
And they can move a maximum of 10. They're not going to, though. They're just going to move up here.
They can move a max of 10. And the letter of the rules say that there should be 3 inches between units. I think with friendly units, we sort of fudge that a little bit just because the table's a little bit smaller. So we just want to have enough space to be able to differentiate the units. And then who's next? You have your archers and your savage bellicose infantry represented by the wolfen. These guys are pretty good on attack, but normally not so great on defense. But in this case, we have given them the super shiny armor buff, which makes them a little more defensive. But that is representing the fact that these are big, savage wolfen with a lot of physical fortitude, so that's why they are a little bit better on defense than typical bellicose infantry.
They activate for movement on a 6+. And they did.
Now these guys are rangers, and they have fleet of foot, so they're very happy in the woods. They don't have any fight penalties for fighting in the woods, and they ignore rough terrain movement penalties. So that's where they want to be, is in the woods. In the desolate woods. So far you've rolled 3 activations. You've had 3 successes, which is pretty good. And then now you have your archers who activate on a
6.
On a 6.
And they activate as well.
They have no fear because they don't know what they're facing. So the archers move up.
And they're just going to kind of
cluster around that rock.
Cluster around that rock. They liked that in the last game, so.
That's right. They hid behind the rock. All you need is one of these guys to be able to see the enemy. Any one of these, if they can see the enemy, then the whole group can fire. Though if a bunch of them are clustered around a rock, then the target will get some sort of cover benefit from that. All right, so that is the Lahnar Baronies. They have moved onto the table. We're counting even the wood areas of the table as being active because our table's kind of small, but they are on the grass and moving toward the enemy to try to defend the world of humans against the undead scourge. So for my first activation, I'm going to try to activate this unit of undead thralls. As I mentioned earlier, they have no feelings, so they are less likely to scatter because of being routed. But they take more damage because they're kind of spindly and fragile, so when Lynn attacks, she'll be able to round up her damage rolls. And so more of the skeletons will go down than if they were typical infantry. So anyway, they move on a 5+. And we got an 8, so that's good. What I'm doing is instead of measuring every individual soldier, I'm just going to move one and kind of move the rest up. And we'll just speed things along that way. We could use movement trays, but it's not really necessary because it goes pretty fast. Now, originally, when we first started talking about this, we were going to try to make these reduced model count units. And so there would be just 6 of these skeletons representing the whole unit, but that seemed a little small once we tried it out. So some of the bigger monsters are reduced model count units, but the rank and file infantry and the archers and stuff like that are a full 12. So that's how we're playing it. Now the Great Skulls.
Move on a 5+.
Yeah, the Great Skulls are the equivalent of heavy cavalry. They are moving on a 5+, which is pretty good. And 3, they do not. They have decided that they are going to play a waiting game. They've let the undead thralls march forward, and that is the end of my turn. So, way to go, Great Skulls. So we are mostly back off the grass at this point and have not moved forward. All right, Lynn, so I only moved a unit of undead thralls, so your baronies now get a chance to move again. What would you like to do?
Now we're going to try the cavalry first. So my cavalry activates on a 5+. And they got an 8, so they get to activate.
All right.
And they can move up to 10.
They're going to defend the ancient desecrated temple from the undead, so the undead can't use it as a base of operations. Who knows what's buried there? Who knows what will happen if they take possession of it? Cavalry moves up, and who's next?
Next is going to be the guard, and they activate on a 5 as well.
Okay.
And they got an 11.
11. They are gung-ho about engaging the undead, which may change once they get a whiff of them, because they're kind of stinky.
And your Great Skulls have fear, so that's not a good thing.
That's right. My Great Skulls do have fear. If they cause you to take a courage test, it's going to be at a -1 penalty, though that can be negated if you're near your leader, which gives you a +1 buff, so you could cancel that out if you're near the leader.
And the gargoyles have poison, which could come into play too.
The gargoyles do have poison. As war beasts, as lesser war beasts, they're terrible on defense. So really they want to be attacking one of your weaker units, though most of your units are pretty tough. All right, who's next? Either your Bellicose Infantry or your archers.
Let's go with the Bellicose.
The Bellicose, the Wolfen.
And they have a 6+ for activation, and they do it with a 9. They're just going to kind of stay in the woods, but they're all going to kind of move up.
They're going to shift up while staying in the woods. The woods provide cover, and they're also obscuring. So if a missile unit was trying to shoot those Wolfen, it could only see 3 inches into the woods. But since you're at the edge of the woods, that's not an issue. Okay, now your archers, who are just plain Jane non-buffed archers. That's just a 4-point unit of archers.
Archers are going to attempt to move. They move on a 6. And they got an 8, so they can move as well. They're not going to move their full 6. They're just going to kind of go over here and try to take out the gargoyles when they move.
Okay. Going to assume a firing position. Okay, so the archers have moved up. They've left their defensive position behind the rock, and they are now behind these 2 little rocks, and hoping that they can maybe shoot some gargoyles out of the sky before they become an issue.
That would be nice.
All right, so now it is the undead turn once again. My poor undead thralls here are going to end up way up in the middle of the battlefield all alone if everyone else forsakes them and leaves them behind. We'll try to move these undead thralls, though. And that's a 5.
They move on a 5+.
They move on a 5+. So now is the time to pre-measure. You can pre-measure in this game. They don't mind moving up into missile range. They just don't want to be stupid about it because they don't move very fast. So you could get quite a few shots off before they close the distance. So the undead thralls have moved up. The Great Skulls are going to try to activate now, and they are the equivalent of heavy cavalry on their goat legs. So let's see what happens. And 7. So yeah, they're going to move up. They can move 10. I would prefer to charge rather than be charged by your heavy cavalry. So I think what we're going to do is kind of move up this way. So the Great Skulls have moved up this way. They don't want to get too enthusiastic about moving up because they don't want to be charged by the elite cavalry over there, nor do they wish to be charged by the Bellicose Infantry. So they would prefer to be on the attack than on the defense. Okay, next we have the Gorgon. The Gorgon moves on a 6. She has a range of 18, but she does not fire very consistently. She is a heavy missile unit, and so she needs a 7+ to fire. She'll move up her full 6, and we'll see what happens. And 7. So she does move. So she's going to move up her 6. And then finally our gargoyles, who can fly and have poison, and they're going to try to move up at 10. So they do indeed move up.
And they can move 12.
They can move 12. They probably don't want to be in range of all those archers if they can avoid it right away. So they are going to move up just a little bit and prepare to descend on some unsuspecting troops at an inopportune time. So the gargoyles are in the desolate forest, ready to pounce. So now it's the Baronies' turn once again. So who's activating first?
The archers, having seen the gargoyles fly over those trees, decided that they're just going to stay where they are. They like the rocks.
Okay.
I think my cavalry is going to attempt to move because right now they're in the line of fire for the Gorgon.
Okay, the Gorgon has a range of 18 inches, can hit the cavalry right now, and so the cavalry may want to move.
Correct. So they move on a 5+, and they did.
The leader of the cavalry has estimated the Gorgon can fire eldritch bolts that far, so they don't want to be in range of that. You had momentarily considered moving them this way, but when we measured it, there wasn't enough space to keep them out of range of the Gorgon and still have a little bit of space between the Bellicose Infantry. So they're going to go here instead. It seems like a prudent move. Okay, so that is the elite cavalry. Now who's next?
I believe I'm going to try to activate the guard. And as long as they stay out of the ruins, they aren't in line for the Gorgon. And they did not activate.
They didn't activate.
It's the chaos of battle.
It's the chaos of battle. They didn't get the runner with the orders from the general, did not make it there in time, and so they're a little slow on the uptake, and so they are going to just stay put. And that is the end of the Baronies of Lahnar. That's the end of their turn. Like a lot of games of this type, the beginning of the game is a lot of kind of positioning and trying to get an angle on things and trying to avoid being charged. And then once everybody's in the thick of it...
A lot of clashing weapons.
That's right. And once it's in the thick of it, then people are just fighting and moving and running and routing and all kinds of stuff happens. Some unit will break, they'll move back, and all of a sudden they'll be in charge range of another unit, which can move in. So it's kind of interesting. All right. The undead thralls are going to attempt to activate. They got a 5, so just barely. Their enchantment is holding for the moment. And they're going to move up and get this party started. So the undead thralls are moving forward into the outskirts of the desecrated temple to try to set up some sort of a foothold. This is our land, and we will defend it to our last bone fragment. So I think next turn, your archers will be able to take a shot at these guys, but there's a lot of cover involved, plus long range. So hopefully that'll keep casualties to a minimum. So the Great Skulls... But they are going to attempt to activate. And they do. And they're going to move up. Kind of like so. Oh, what the heck. Let's try to move the Gorgon. And 5. She decides she's not going to move. She's going to stay right where she is. So that is the end of my turn. So now the Baronies of Lahnar get a turn. And these heavy infantry are pretty darn tough, but they're slow, so it's hard to line them up. Cavalry, on the other hand, are not slow. So, what are you thinking?
Gonna try to move the guard.
Okay.
How far are they from your little thralls?
More than 6.
More than 6. So 5+ to activate, and they are ready to get into the action. Okay. But they're just gonna come up to here.
Okay.
Because we don't want the Gorgon to shoot them.
All right, they're creeping forward. The Gorgon doesn't want to do much of anything. She's just kind of hanging back there.
The archers are going to try to activate, and they activate on a 6.
All right, the 4-point archers wish to activate their light missiles, and they do activate.
And they can move 6.
They're going to move forward.
They're going to move forward so that they can shoot things.
Another thing you can't do in this game is move and shoot, and that's kind of frustrating. You can either shoot or move, and so you can't kind of march your archers up and then start shooting arrows. You have to wait till the next turn. Kind of forming up alongside the guard there. Okay, so the guard moved up. The archers have joined them. So now you have your elite cavalry and or your bellicose infantry, but you're just going to stand pat.
Yep.
All right. Your elite cavalry are exerting some discipline. They're kind of standing pat. They're not going to move forward. And the wolves are hiding in the forest, ready to pounce. And now it is time for the undead to make a move. So on the other side of the desecrated temple, there's the shiny gold gleam of all of these barony forces coming over the horizon. And the undead are ready to wage war on the living. So let's see what happens here. Right now, there's just a lot of posturing. No one wants to get in range. All right, we're going to try to do this. Now that the heavy cavalry are safely on the other side of the battlefield, the gargoyles are going to try to activate, and they do not. They refuse to leave the trees, and so that is the end of my turn.
All right.
So Lynn's question was, can those archers shoot these gargoyles? And I think that's probably at the very limit of their range. Plus, it's in the woods. You could say that this is the edge of the woods right here. So technically that archer can see something fluttering in the woods. So your shoot skill is what, 5+?
Yep.
At long range, it's a 6+, or just a 6.
6.
And the gargoyles will get an extra layer of armor for being in the woods.
Okay.
So
their armor is normally 3, but first I got to see if I will shoot them with a 6+. And they do want to shoot them.
The archers do want to loose a volley of arrows at the gargoyles.
So we need at least 4 6s.
Right. Rolling 12 dice, you need 4 6s to get a hit. Oh, you did get
1.
You did get 1. That's pretty good shooting. Okay, so you take the gargoyles from
6 to 5.
6 hits to 5, and they're going to have to make a courage check. That would be a real drag if they don't make their courage check. Are they within 12 inches of their leader? They are not. Their courage is what?
Their courage for the gargoyles is 4+.
4+. So now it is a 5+. They better get this. And they did, just barely. So they were startled by all those arrows raining down through the trees, but they didn't break. They didn't become a battered unit. So yeah, that was good shooting by the archers there. So, who's next?
My guard is going to try to move up and give the archers a little bit of help in case the gargoyles come up.
All right.
So they move on a 5+, and they do. And they don't want to block their line of sight.
Yeah, you have a slim channel here. See, this guy is within the edge of the forest. If you block them from him, then you might not be able to shoot them at all.
Right. But I can move them a little bit.
All right. So they are going to just do a slight shuffle. They don't want to block the archer's line of sight to the gargoyles, and they do not want to be in range of the Gorgon. So they're playing a dangerous game there. So next you have your bellicose infantry, which have a wild charge. So if someone gets within 8 inches of them, they may have to make a wild charge check at the beginning of their next turn. And your elite cavalry, who can move 10. Okay, so the wolfen are going to forego movement, as are the heavy cavalry, because they do not want to get in range of the Gorgon. It's pretty close.
We'll stay where we are.
So right now we have a bit of a stalemate, as everyone's just trying to get into the ideal distance to make the move that benefits them the most.
Correct.
So that is the Lahnar Baronies. Now we go to the undead once again. All right, the gargoyles are going to attempt to move. 7, they do.
They do.
So they're going to move their full 12. I have to be very careful with these gargoyles because when I bought them, they were broken. And so they are held together with pins, super glue, and a dollop of hope. So that is what's holding these guys together. but they are happy to be on the battlefield and want to eat some archers. So they have moved up their 12. Yeah, so they're inside of long range now, so the archers will have a better time shooting them, and they better shoot them. Okay, now the undead thralls are going to attempt to activate, and they do.
They got a 7.
They got a 7. They're going to move this way. They want to say hello to the archers too. Hi guys, how are you? All right, next, let's try to move the Gorgon. Come on now. And yeah, it does get to move. Move up that way. And finally, the Great Skulls. I think the Great Skulls are just going to stand pat. I think they're going to survey the landscape. Okay, now it is the Baronies' turn again. And the undead are kind of marching forward, so...
We're going to attempt to activate the archers first.
Okay.
And they shoot on a 6+, same as their move. And they do.
7.
They get a 7.
They do activate. So they're not in long range anymore, so they shoot on a 5+.
And there's no cover.
There's no cover.
And the gargoyles have armor of 3.
Right.
1.
So you got 1 hit. That brings the gargoyles down to 4. So they need to make their courage check. Now they need a 6 or better, and they better not blow it. And they made it.
They got it.
Woo! That was important.
Yes, it was.
Who's next on the activation roster?
I believe the guard.
All right.
They activate on a 5+. And they do. And they're going to try to protect the archers.
All right.
Because the archers are quaking in their boots now.
And you shot some gargoyles, but not enough.
Yep.
So the guard are moving up to protect the lightly armored archers. So the guard have moved up, and they're providing a wall of steel between the forces of the undead and their puny little archers, who've actually done pretty good.
Yep.
They've actually taken out
One gargoyle.
one gargoyle model. So, okay, so you have your elite cavalry here. You have your Bellicose Infantry here, otherwise known as the Wolfen. And what would you like to do?
So we're going to get the cavalry and my leader closer to my other troops, so they're within 12 inches.
So the cavalry here are going to try to move closer to the archers in case there's some casualties, and they need to have a courage buff.
Yes. And they
6, and they do. Do a little shuffle.
Yep.
So now things are heating up here on this wing of the battlefield. And then finally your Wolfen here in the desolate forest.
And they're going to try to move as well, and they activate on a 6.
And they do not.
Nothing. They got a 5.
They're munching on some rabbits and some acorns, and so they're not really interested in entering the battle at this point.
Let the chaos begin.
Yeah, so things are about to come to a head here. So let's see what happens. Got to be careful here. All right, I think the undead thralls here. Let's see, what's their attack activation?
Their attack activation is 6+.
6+. 7, they did. So they're going to charge your golden guard here, your heavy infantry. Get as many of them in base to base as I can, and then just pile the rest of them up.
They both have an armor of 3. Your attack value is 4. My defense value is 4.
So the undead are attacking on a 4+, and they roll 12 dice. So I did get 2 hits. So 2 of the guard go down. Now they're going to attack in return. And you get to round up your casualties. 3. So you take out 3. But the skeletons are not that fearful. All right, so it's a furious clash of the living and the dead. The skeletons, let's see, they lost that combat, so they're going to have to back up. Let's do a courage roll. Their courage is 0.
Yep.
But they have -3 because of 3 casualties, so they do not want to get any negatives.
Right.
And they're fine. So they hold their ground. Actually, they're going to back up, do an orderly step back. You want to roll your courage? So your guards, the courage is normally 4. You've taken 2 casualties, which would make it 6. But you get a buff from your leader, so actually you just need to roll a 5+. So let's see what happens.
And they do not.
So they have to move back half their movement. They have become battered, so they are making a somewhat hasty retreat. We can turn them around. They'll have to try to recover next turn. And the undead do an orderly step back. They withdraw about 3 inches. So they step back. All right, so that happened. Next, we're going to try to activate the gargoyles. And they're going to try to swoop in and attack those archers. So their attack activation is what?
5+.
5+ on the attack. They like to attack. Come on, guys. And they did. So they go screaming into the archers.
Well, at least their defense value is better than their attack value.
What is the defense value on an archer?
Defense value is 5+, so same as shoot.
All right. So the archers are good at shooting, not so good at hand-to-hand, and fair on defense. And another rule that we typically find in some games is like Overwatch or something like that. I keep expecting the archers to be able to shoot as the gargoyles fly in, but they can't. So the gargoyles are still over half strength. They get to attack with 12 dice. And what is their attack strength?
4+.
4+. Plus they have poison on a 6. So let's see what happens here. 6s.
1s.
6s would be great. I see a couple 6s.
This is not going to be good for the archers.
This is not going to be a good day for the archers.
Probably going to break.
And their armor value is what? 2, I think, right?
Yeah.
So 6s count as 2, so that's 1. That's another 1. That's a success. That's a success. That is a success. And this 5 is an extra. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 casualties from the archers, bringing them down to 7.
That's not good.
And they attack back.
I hit on a 5+. I needed 3, so nothing.
Yeah, so the gargoyles have an armor of 3. You needed at least 3 5s. Didn't get them. So the gargoyles won that engagement. 5 archers are removed from the board.
Yeah, courage is 4+, so they need an 8+.
But they're within range of the leader.
Yeah, that's why they need an 8, otherwise
Okay.
they'd need a 9.
Roll them.
No.
And they don't.
They go away.
So they rout. They don't just break, they rout.
Well, at least they did some damage before they left.
So now I think we have a bit of an opportunity in that the Gorgon can see the guard and is in range to shoot. I can see you. I can see there is a line of sight here, but most of the guard would have some sort of cover. So that increases your armor value from 3 to 4 in terms of being shot. So first we need to see if the Gorgon even wants to shoot, because she's kind of finicky. An 8. She does want to shoot. So she's shooting the guard. She's shooting way over here at the guard.
This is not looking good for the guard.
Yeah, so she's not at long range, so she hits on a 4+. But the guard are getting cover, so she needs to do 4 hits to get 1 success.
Right. And
So-
she does, definitely.
And she's got poison. Just kidding.
No. It wouldn't work on that kind of shot anyway.
Just kidding. I think
So 2
that's
hits.
just... Oh, 2. Yeah, she did get 2 hits.
So they will probably rout as well,
So 2 guard
because they're down to 8.
are removed. So they're down to 8, so they have to make their courage roll at a -4, but they get 1 back because of the leader, so -3.
So 7+.
7+.
And they rout.
And they don't do it. They rout.
This is going to be a short game.
Now, another thing that could have happened there is you could have failed your courage roll, but not routed. You could have stayed above 0 and just been battered and then moved back and still been on the field and had a chance to recover. But because the roll was so low and you went into the negatives, they routed. Now, one thing about this game, it can turn pretty quickly. Like on the last game, where you basically wiped me out. You took out my leader, and then the rest of the army kind of crumbled.
What's the skulls going to do?
They're going to attempt to move,
And they do.
and they do. I would prefer not to be in range of your cavalry. They're going to kind of skirt the edge of the grass and move that way. And really, the Bellicose Infantry, the Wolfen, are pretty fierce when they're attacking, but I just feel like the Great Skull kind of wants to get in there and fight a little bit. Now it is the Lahnar's turn, and unfortunately, a lot of their ground troops have sort of scattered to the wind, leaving the leader over here and the Wolfen here to try to turn the tide of battle, and it could happen.
So wild charge on a 5+.
So the Wolfen are going to wild charge in a 5+, and they do. So they charge the Great Skull. Now what would be hilarious here is
if I killed your leader.
If in my hubris you killed my leader.
That would be hilarious. I attack on a 3+, and you only have armor of 3.
Right. Roll right there if you want to.
1, 2,
2.
2.
So the Great Skull takes 2. That's enough to remove 1 model. Defense value 5+. So he rolls 12 and he's going to get 5+. 2, 3. I got 1 hit, so I do 1 damage on the Wolfen. Take him down to 11. But that's enough to make you make a courage test.
Right.
So the Great Skull took 2 hits. Courage is 4+. -2 because of 2 hits, so 6+.
+1 plus leader.
+1 because he's a leader, so
5+.
5+. And he's fine. The Wolfen, however, okay, yeah, they're in range of the leader, but they have a -1 because of fear. So what is their courage?
4. Well, it's a 5 because -2. 1 for fear and 1 for losing a guy.
Okay.
And they don't do it.
And they blow it. They got a 4. Okay, so they are battered. They're going to move back.
Into the woods.
Half their movement into the woods. And so they are battered. They'll have to recover next turn. And finally, you have your elite cavalry. And what are they going to try to do?
They're going to attempt to attack the gargoyles.
All right.
5+. And they do.
So this is going to be bad for the gargoyles. So the elite cavalry are very strong on offense. The beasts here, the lesser war beasts, known as the gargoyles, are very weak on defense. So they have to defend on a 6. And they do not get their poison because it's an attack thing, at least the way we read the rules. So this is a good opportunity for the Lahnar elite cavalry to take out those gargoyles.
So they hit on a 3+.
All right. Lots.
1, 2, 3. 3.
Okay, so you did 3. That takes the gargoyles down to 1, so 1 model is removed, and then the last half of a gargoyle is going to have to make a courage check. But first, yeah, they still attack at 12 because they were above 50% when you attack them. And they got 3 6s.
They needed 4.
They needed 4 because of your heavy armor, so that's not enough. All right. Gargoyle's courage is 4+, -5, so they need a 9+. And they don't do it. That's actually less than 0, so the last gargoyle is dispatched back to the underworld. Though they did their job, they destroyed some archers, which is really all they wanted to do. So you would think I'd have an advantage here, but it's really not that great of an advantage because this unit is wounded. The elite cavalry are full strength. The Wolfen are full strength, almost. They're down 1.
But they're battered.
But they're battered, and the Great Skull is kind of wounded. He can try to attack these Wolfen in the woods, but that's advantageous to them and not to him. So the undead thralls are going to attempt to attack the elite cavalry. And 5, they do, I think. Is that their attack?
Attack on 6+. So you lose your turn.
So they do not, and I lose my turn. Well, there's that. So the first thing that happens is these Wolfen have to attempt to recover. So they're out of range of the leader, so they don't get the leader buff. So they just need to roll a 5+.
And they don't.
4, and they do not. So they move half of their speed away.
Away from those guys?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they go down to 10. They take another wound, and they have to move 4 inches.
I need to do better on my courage rolls.
The courage rolls are terrible.
They're awful. That's what's killed my army, is my courage rolls. Nothing else, really.
It's the stench of the undead, I think, that does it.
It is.
What's that horrible smell? So they have moved away. So they should have been able to easily recover, but they made a statistically unlikely roll. So your elite cavalry caught a break. They didn't get charged by the undead thralls, and now they can charge if they wish to. Though they could do countercharge. Had I been successful, you could have countercharged me in the middle. You could have made a roll to try to meet me in the middle, but now they can just do an old-fashioned charge and mop those skeletons off
And
the
they
face of
are
the earth.
going to. I attack on a 3+, and you have an armor of
3.
3.
And you round up damage.
So 3 hits.
All right, so you round up, so you take off 3 skeletons. They go from 9 down to 6. But they get to attack back at full strength.
Mm-hmm.
For the moment.
And theirs is 4+ on defense too, so it doesn't change much.
So 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a lot of ones, but they did get 1 hit.
So they're at 5.
So they're down to 5. So the undead thralls, their courage is 0, which makes them pretty courageous because they have no feelings. But the enchantment can be broken if they take enough damage. So they've taken 6 wounds. They need to roll their courage and at a -6 and not get a negative.
So 6+.
And they're fine. The enchantment holds. So
But they move back.
But they do move back. And then you need to make a courage roll.
At 4+.
At 4+. And you don't.
Okay, I'm done.
Okay.
I'm done. I think the game's over.
Well, that's allowed. Their heart was not in it. So they...
That's pretty sad.
So we'll just say the Baronies, they tried their best. The knights were pretty valiant. They put a hurt on the undead, and they did slow the advance. But in the end, the unnatural nature of their opponents was too much.
The undead are pretty creepy, and the Lahnar seem to be overwhelmed and haven't been able to make 1 courage roll yet. So I think they will go home and regroup.
I have a theory about it. You want to hear it? I think that they put so much time into polishing their gold armor that they didn't want to get like undead mucus all over it. And so they have decided to go back and get some more troops. Maybe they're more expendable and send them out. But they did manage to blunt the undead offensive. So we did lose the gargoyles. We lost half of the undead thralls. And we lost 1 of the great skulls. So that'll slow down the advance into the harvest. And hopefully the farmers will not lose all their crops. So.
Yes, hopefully.
Okay, folks, we hope you enjoyed today's battle report. Like I said, we're going to try to play at least 1 more game of Dragon Rampant, maybe 2, time permitting, and with some different forces to show you how some of the different units work. But until then, thanks as always for stopping by and checking out today's video. If you like what we do, please subscribe to our channel. Please give this video a big thumbs up. And of course, please visit us online at our website, skirmishwargames.com, and we will talk to you soon.
Remember to do good on your courage rolls. Those are some of the most important rolls in the game.
Yeah. Remember to gird your loins and summon your courage. Makes a big difference.
Yeah. If you miss your courage rolls, your troops run away.
They run away. Run away. Brave, 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 brave Sir Robin.